My name is Liz Chilsen, and I am the Executive Director of the Riverside Arts Center, and I am welcoming all of you to here today to this conversation with Colleen Plumb and Katherine Kassouf Cummings. And they're going to be talking about their installation that they collaborated on that is installed at the moment in the FlexSpace Gallery at Riverside Arts Center. And you can see Colleen is actually at the FlexSpace, so this is what the installation looks like during the day. Colleen makes photographs, videos, and installations investigating systems that perpetuate power imbalance. Her work is held in several permanent collections and has been widely published and exhibited. Her first photography monograph, Animals Are Outside Today, which was published by Radius Books in 2011, this critically documents humans' ambivalent dispositions towards animals. Her recent photography book, 30 Times a Minute, also published by Radius in 2020, examines the plight of captive elephants. Plumb lives in Chicago and has taught photography and video at Columbia College, Chicago since 1999. And Katherine Kassouf Cummings is a daughter, a sister, a friend, a teacher, an ecological citizen, and a writer. She co-edited the book, What Kind of Ancestor Do You Want to Be?, which was published by the University of Chicago Press in 2021. She serves as managing editor at the Center for Humans and Nature. And when not at her desk, she shares her passion for movement and women's health as a Pilates instructor. And so I wanted to welcome Katherine and Colleen and invite you to talk about your installation. And I wanted to just say this installation, I first talked with Colleen about this. This is kind of part of, it meshes really well with something that we're trying to do at the Riverside Arts Center during the pandemic, is to continue to bring people experiences as physical experiences of art, even though sometimes we haven't been able to actually go into galleries or visit galleries. We do have an exhibition in the Free Art Gallery now, which you can make an appointment to visit, and you're welcome to do that also. And we will be having a conversation with Camille Silverman next week on Sunday about her work in that exhibition. But Colleen's installation is really designed to be seen from the street. And so it's this perfect sort of socially distanced opportunity. It has a daytime view and a nighttime view, which is something I'm sure Colleen will talk to you about. And so I will just turn it over to Colleen and Katherine, and we will have about 20 minutes conversation, and then I'll open it up for Q&A after that, and we can hear your questions, or you can send them to me in the chat. Okay, welcome.
What I thought I would do is just talk about how the whole project started, and then give Kate a chance to talk about it, and then we can converse. So last year in November, I went to a summit with the Phoenix Zones Initiative. It's an organization that talks about sustainability and human rights, human and animal rights, and how a lack of rights or affects health and well-being. So I went to this summit, or a think tank. Like, we were coming up with initiatives to what are just some initiatives. It was really an honor to be invited, and I learned about this article that then I read by the Human Rights Watch, and it was about slaughterhouses and the workers in slaughterhouses. I read, and I made myself watch this video that showed how chickens were slaughtered, and I read more. It was about the lack of protections that humans have who work in slaughterhouses and the factory industrial food systems. And I just read this article in disbelief. People are in chicken poultry slaughterhouses, people are wearing diapers, and because they can't take breaks. They're the least protected workers pretty much of any. They lose limbs and fingers, and have lung injury from inhaling these chemicals all the time. And just when I read this, when I was able to, I was thinking, what should I do next, for a project? And I mean, after coming from that summit, I was just thinking about people and animals. There was a lot of talk about factory farming, and I mean, I just very innocently read this article, and which a lot of people, we've all kind of heard about what's happening for slaughterhouse workers. And when I did that, it got into my brain so deeply, imagining this, this is a system that we all are participating in and not really thinking about, not knowing. And I went to a dinner where the person served chicken, this platter of chicken breasts, and they were really fat. And I don't believe it. I couldn't believe the size of these chicken breasts. And then that too stuck in my head. And I thought, what would it look like if I made a project where I created sculptures of chicken breasts, like 175, because I found out that 175 is the rate of death of the conveyor of these in these factories. The chickens come through and they kill 175 every 60 seconds. And that's actually how many chicken wings are right here. So there's 175. So I started thinking, this was last November, December, what would happen if I made these objects out of plaster? And then I got plaster and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And then so I started learning how to make molds. This is going to be such a long answer, bear with me. I just was like, what do I mean, I'm a photographer. What am I thinking about sculpting chicken breasts in a pile and to show how many 175 looked like? And I just couldn't get it out of my head. So I just went into that, really down that journey of thinking about visually and physically showing that amount, 1 minute. And the chicken breasts were really cool. When I went to the store and I bought them and I talked to the butcher and I was like, it was like $1.50. And, there's a lot of complicated questions about where people buy meat and why it's so cheap and why is also organic meat so expensive, and what there's a lot to really dissect there. That's maybe not the right word to use, but so the chicken breast was too round. It was sort of like, one thing led to another. I sculpted chicken feet, and then I started, and none of it was really working. And I learned about voodoo and chicken feet is a really big symbol in protection in voodoo. So I didn't want to have that connotation. So then I thought, oh, I'll do a wing. And so I started sculpting these wings. And so every wing it was really a challenge to figure out how to actually do it, like to make molds and get the right material. And they kept breaking and it wasn't working. And finally I figured out how to do it. And every time I did it, it became like this ritual, almost of obsession, about that each chicken is a life that matters and that doesn't want to die, just like us. We don't want to die. We don't want to go through a conveyor belt, and either do they. I mean, even though they can't speak English, or language like we do, they don't want to die. They care about their babies. So they matter. And so everyone kind of became this ritual of honoring the fact that they exist. So, and then I started thinking about, after I did the 175, I started thinking about the workers and how could I represent the workers in these factories, and just as much as the chickens in their lives. So, because that's where I started, was thinking about these workers and how they're so exploited. And so the bones, you can see there's 175 bones on each side. They're divided. And those are the internal, and that's where Kate comes in. Is we started working on this project, on this collaborative project for Edelman Gallery, and I had been making all these the chicken wings, and we were going to collaborate on some project. We weren't sure what it would be, and I thought I'd like to do something with this project. So that was kind of the beginning. I had one time where I started projecting the interior, the raw bone onto the wing that I cast. and created that for an installation along with Kate's writings. And it was to raise what we couldn't see, which are the workers and the lives. And so that's where you can't tell from this projection right now because it's too bright, but there is a breathing that's occurring. So I project the interior. I think it comes up if I go close like this, does it? Yeah. So it's became this breathing. And that is a result of working with Kate and being pushed to come up with what would be a good installation for that show last summer at Edelman. And then to talk about the workers, I started casting all of the bones also. So within my mind, I was I wanted to do a much larger installation. And that's what this is, which sprung from that time. And then Kate wrote, we met, and I'll let you maybe you can take it over, that when we met, and it was before the pandemic in February, and just it kind of kept evolving, and this collaborative discussions that we would have about what this could be. And I kept making all these bones, thinking, why am I doing this? This is like, what is the point? What am I doing? I love that I just kept going and kept making, and then this installation is a whole other layer of like adding the plywood, which I can talk about maybe later, and then how to respond to the space. But Kate wrote these stories. So Kate, why don't you tell us about how we started talking about, again, this idea of the invisible and what isn't seen. And
thanks, Colleen. And thanks for everyone who is able to join us and everyone who will absorb this later on through the recording. It's really an honor to be able to share this work with you in this time. And it's been such a gift to work with Colleen, because even the invitation to do a collaboration is such a different way of thinking about writing and thinking about creating art, I think, than our culture tends to approach these types of work. But of course, nothing happens in a vacuum. And we talked about this a little bit for the first installation of the work last year, how as a writer, you're constantly absorbing and observing. And for me, really, the process of writing is about understanding that and kind of writing out to learn how my experience of the world and the experiences I'm given, how they kind of fit together. And I think it's been said by many writers, but you kind of write to learn what you think. And so around the time that Colleen had invited me to participate in this really cool show with the collaborative concept, and we were talking around kind of what we were both working on, a question I was holding at the time was, what makes the invisible visible? And that's what the writings that Colleen held up, and that anybody can pick up at the FlexSpace, and also you can find on the website of the Art Center a recording of a reading of the piece. So I'm not going to go too much into those stories, but the story I will share is the one that didn't end up in this, which was what drove me to the question. And the question just connected up so beautifully with the questions that Colleen was holding, that we then started kind of creating work that was directed a little bit more around this question of what makes the invisible visible. That became our meeting space, and that's where we were conversing as we were going back and forth meeting. And the experience of working with an artist like Colleen, and who works so expertly in so many different mediums and is really pushing to the edges of her craft, and very much finding new territories to express in, was just so cool for me, because I would get these texts from Colleen with plaster sculptures and concepts, and even down to technical, there is so much involved. I just for someone who doesn't understand what it is to create in that form, being able to witness that process of creation was so humbling. And and yeah, for everyone who's seeing what's behind Colleen right now, I mean, it really is, the process of creation is just, of these sculptures, is just a phenomenal act in and of itself, regardless of the product that you're getting to witness. And so, you know, thinking about all these like technical things, it was just really interesting to see the way that the creation worked into that material form for Colleen. And then of course her questions and the question of the projection, Colleen, that you just mentioned around breathing, was, I think, another big hinging point, or like it shaped what I was doing in a way that if I had just said, okay, I want to write something about what makes the invisible visible, it would have never ended up in the form that you could hear or read in this essay. I don't want to go too much over time. What do you think, Colleen? Is there time to share a little bit how the question came together?
I think so, yeah.
So, because I think it does kind of help, you know, speak to the project and the larger work. I was out with a friend at like Montrose Beach, where 2 summers ago, a pair of piping plovers, the only breeding pair on this side of Lake Michigan, had chosen to nest and raise their chicks. And there's a bird sanctuary there, but there's also concessions and volleyball and a dog beach and a human beach, and it's in the middle of the city of Chicago. And it was such an exciting thing for this endangered species to be, you know, raising their babies in this place, exciting for our region and, you know, for the populations, but also exciting for Chicagoans. And so there were kind of migrations of people coming to see these birds growing up, and a friend of mine and I went over to try and find the birds. And at that point it was late. The babies were already fledged, but the papa bird was still watching over them and protecting them. And there was a big, like, there were monitors who were there almost around the clock to protect them from predators. But also at that point, the birds had migrated over by the volleyball court. And so they were protecting them from the people a bit too. And, you know, a couple of birders were there at the time. There were a lot of regulars who would come and check on the babies every day. And we were able to watch through some scopes and binoculars and learn a little bit more about the chicks and see them really up close. And they are small birds, but just it was so phenomenal. And the people who came to see the birds, it was just like, that was the reason to be on that beach. But as we were leaving, my friend and I, a volleyball team had knocked their ball way off their field, and it ran into the habitat that was blocked off to protect the chicks. And one of the women who was watching the chicks ran in and grabbed the ball, and we were standing there, and the guy from the team who had run over to retrieve his ball was like, oh my gosh, right, there are these birds here, but they're like invisible. I remember thinking, like, yeah, they're invisible to you, but like there are 20 of us here who, like, this is all we can see. Like, we're in this place because of these birds that, because of your experience and your perspective and why you're on the beach, seem invisible to you. So I was like, wow, what an interest, what makes something that to us in another way of being would otherwise be invisible? What brings that into view, and maybe even makes it a question of such importance that you would, take an afternoon to attend to it? And so that was the question that I was holding when I started, Colleen and I started talking about this, and it really seemed to illuminate some of what she was also grappling with the project. So I'll kind of leave it there, I think.
I love that story, that we kept having these conversations, and it almost hearing that was kind of incentive, or, I mean, it's just, I love how you think, Kate. I love your mind of how you tell stories, and how you, just thinking about those words. I mean, that's just so magical that this person, and it illustrates so much. It illustrated everything that I was trying to do with this work, that it's invisible, that we just go and buy something, and that it's exploiting if we could get to a place in our society where we you know, the ideal would be not exploiting anyone, right? But that how many people have been exploited for me to get it at this price? And if I did it a little differently, would there be less exploitation or less suffering? And to keep thinking about that, that it might not be as easy to stay away from the where the birds were. It's, we stay away from there to protect them. And that's such a metaphor for our whole world, like give way for those who need protection. Just like people who are undocumented have no protection for where they work or for their lives. They just go do, you know, I don't even know how to even talk about that, or protecting, you know, it's a lot easier to just bulldoze and do whatever we want, right? Or pay the least amount, you know, buying organic things supports more, and it supports our planet, it supports us. It's harder though. It's much harder to give way sometimes. And so we don't, but I think that if we just keep asking these questions, right? Then we can even think it through. Like maybe we're at a place where we're willing to ask the questions, and then little tiny changes can happen, you know, because if I don't know, you know, that's why also the stories are so amazing, especially like the first one in where you talk about your Uber driver who stopped eating meat because he saw the transporter filled with all the chickens, and that story of what he saw, yeah, and that how it changed him. Or the third story with the judge, that the COVID cases for the factory workers, that the town in Michigan had a high number of cases, but those weren't the regular people. They were the factory workers. Though, like that, the language, the regular people, a judge, you know, like that we just say these things. It wasn't just the regular folks.
Yeah. We say it, I mean, we have these experiences ourselves. I mean, we're so embedded in our ways and in how our experience of the world has shaped us, and also the culture that we're born into, you know. So I see what's sitting behind you, Colleen, as a moment of visibility. If people want to witness this, it's like that chicken breast that you bought at the store. Here's what happened in a second of the story of getting that into your refrigerator, getting that food onto your table and into your body. You know, at what point do you want to look at how our lives are all so interconnected? You know, where do you want to attend to that story? And it's very humbling, the broader the view, and the more you start to look for your interconnectedness. And
yeah. And it's tough. I mean, it's not, I don't want to be kind of like a downer about like, don't do this or don't do that. You know, it's hard. It's really hard to know. And we don't know until we know. And that, I guess for me, I didn't really know until I read that Human Rights Watch article. And I mean, you know, but you don't really know until you look and see. And then I got so, I mean, when I unloaded these from their boxes, you know, and it was a year. It like really helped me get through the pandemic too, is like in my kitchen, I was just always making chickens and not making dinner, but making plaster chickens. And that ritual became something my family witnessed and was a presence. You know, we're home and I was present. I wasn't up in my studio. I was right there. And it became really a gift because of having that ritual, literally they gifted me that I had to go make another batch of chicken, you know, casts, and to physically make something. It was so needed, and it helped a lot. And then when I brought them here, I have to say it was really, I'm gonna cry. It was so moving because I felt like they had a place, you know, I was placing them and that everyone could see as they pass. And I also feel like I'm so programmed, you know, as a human American to think it's stupid to care about chickens. You know, it doesn't matter. But then I get around people who are activists, and then I'm shored up by that. I'm like, no, this is real. Because it's not just the chickens, and it's the whole system. It's the whole gigantic system that we need to rethink, you know. And when I put them in their rows, I was like, okay, I hope everybody will see you now, you know. It just felt like an energy. It felt like that there's a spiritual energy in the making, in an active ritual. There's always an energy. There's a spiritual act of thinking about some of a soul, or those who have to kill them to get paid, that just to think of them and to think of them all, you know, like that thinking does that have an effect? Does it have, I always wonder about that, like how much effect can it have? And can what we make, can it carry forward? You know, in all my work, I'm trying to do that. I'm trying to like open a conversation. What is that? What is that about? And then it can carry forward. I mean, I hope they can, you know, and everybody here who's listening, it's just like, what do we do? Look at the Phoenix Zones Initiative website. Think about buying less animal products or none, and think about where you get it and how much you're paying for it. And if you can, I mean, pay for the highest quality if you have to. I guess that's a privilege. That's such you know, it's a complicated conversation, because if it's privilege to be able to pay the highest amount, you know. I don't know. I don't know the solutions. I'm Kate. I've told you I'm going to go down this rabbit hole where it's like really hard as an artist to talk about these things, because I'm not the expert. I'm the person who's responding to the experts, and I rely on the people who are policymakers or scientists or activists who do know more, and then I can kind of collaborate with their work and make work about it and grapple with it. Maybe that's the mission I feel for my own work, is how to learn as much as I can, and then how to infuse that into my work. So maybe we should take questions.
I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about the nest that you've created there in the FlexSpace for the chicken wings, because I think that idea kind of evolved as you got to the space and started to plan how you were going to install it.
Yes, thanks, Liz. So when I originally was going to, I envisioned all the wings and the bones on a platform, somehow as referencing an assembly line, factory, rows and rows. And I also set them up in my studio as they seemed like tombstones to me, like a military cemetery where they were in these strict rows. And as you go around them, you see just different diagonals, and that they become markers for each life. And so I wanted to, you know, think about the cemetery, and then also the factory assembly. And this platform idea was my original plan. And then I thought, well, how do you deal with all this space? And it just really happened organically, like, because they felt dwarfed in the space. So then one of the pieces of plywood was against the wall, and I really loved how it looked. And then I loved how I haven't even mentioned the projection in the back that I created to activate this space in a larger way. And that I dreamt about this, that I would use my hands as where they would pass one to the next and honor each one. And that almost like in an assembly where it's endless. You know, this is an endless train of lives going through. And so I wanted that to be reflected in this video where they just keep going, but in a more like as a sacred way. And I really loved when I was testing the projection, how it looked on one piece. And so I wanted to create a sheet as if it's like this conveyor, and then the walls, it needed walls, you know, on either side. And then I felt like, oh, I'm making a nest for them, like a little a house to hold. So that was really cool to deal with that in a space.
And I love the reverential quality of the hands. You know, I think that really is so conveyed, the way that you kind of gently place them, and then also this sort of endless cycle of just repeating. It really is. You're welcome to turn your video on and ask a question if you'd like. And sort of while people are maybe doing that, Colleen and I were talking about the fact that years ago, we worked together on an installation of her photographs at the water tower in the historic water tower in the City Gallery, it was called at the time. And this exhibition is so much different than that. And so I have really enjoyed over the years watching Colleen's work transform from photography framed on the walls, which is what we did at the water tower, and the projections and installations and that sort of thing. And I know you've got another project going on at Roman Susan that's going to open soon. And so there's this variety of ways that you approach this set of ideas that is really very it's sort of broad and also very focused. Like it's always about animal rights and the way that humans and animals intersect and
together. You know, what an arc, right? That was my second show in Chicago, my second solo show from Animals Are Outside Today, that series. So I started doing photography, and then when I did, that was a 12-year project. And then when I started doing the elephant project was just, I thought I have to do this in video because the elephants are swaying. And I don't really remember exactly how I knew I had to do that. It just was like, I have to do video. So, so I learned how to do video and then made that video, and then, you know, went for 5 years to 60 zoos to document this behavior that elephants do in captivity. They lose their minds, so they rock incessantly back and forth, and it's just, you know, horrifying. And so that video, I mean, that happened really organically, where I thought, why don't I project it? I got a grant from the Department of Cultural Affairs to do one projection, or, you know, I thought, what if I project it outside onto this wall so people could see it? So innocently, like that would be cool. And then I did it, and it was really hard to figure out how to do it. So then I kind of got addicted to doing it, actually, because I saw the response, like public, injecting a video into the public space where people don't expect it. And then you can talk about the work to one person at a time. It really was a powerful experience. And so projecting the video was, again, it was just this organic process of doing that first one and then continuing for 5 years to do it. And then this project, as I said, I just was like, what would it look like to have a pile of these chickens? I mean, I guess I keep going further, but it's always based in, I feel like I'm always a photographer because I feel like it's printing. Like this was a very chemical process. You know, I'm pouring the plaster into the mold, and I felt like I was developing film, and I'm printing each one. And so there's this repetitiveness to it. So it felt familiar, you know, making these. And then the project that's opening on February 1st at Roman Susan is also about, it's a webcam recordings for 4 years of this polar bear. And I guess it's just whatever the project is, you know, I made a book of the polar bear screenshots too. So I do feel like it's a multiplicity thing. It's about collecting, and it's about collecting evidence isn't almost like a documentary photographer would collect evidence of some idea or something you're collecting. And so I'm collecting and to show and to have, you know, indisputable evidence of something. So that also is just lens-based, and that project was recordings of a webcam. Again, it's like surveillance, and how does photography fit into our culture? All surrounding these ideas of this power imbalance, or what is normal, you know, what is normal? Is captivity, how is it accepted as normal? How is mass slaughter accepted as normal? So just kind of questioning, but I do feel like I miss a little bit lately, I miss, you know, just making pictures. So maybe I don't know. I mean, I think that it's whatever the project needs is what I'm doing. But I do feel a tug to work more on making this particular video that I have been working on. You know, that is very photographic.
We have a question from, I'm not sure from who, but could you share some thoughts about the link between corporate accountability versus protecting the workers' need for employment?
Oh, gosh, that's the big question, right? I mean, corporate accountability versus the need. So like Tyson giving employment to so many people. That's what like Phoenix Zone's initiative is talking about. Like, how can, if we're going to eliminate something, if we're going to eliminate certain jobs, how do we replace? It's not just abolish, it's how to sustainably replace. But that's a bigger question. You know, I don't know. What do you think? Who asked that?
Would you like to unmute or turn on your screen and ask a question? You cannot, I think you can unmute if you don't want to be on the screen.
I mean, you don't have to too. It's just, I guess, Kate, what do you think? Help me.
Oh, the work of transformation. I think it needs to be, and this is what I was trying to work out in the writings, in terms of how language participates in the way that we see and in what we create, and then how do we imagine something that we've never seen? How do we see that invisible thing? Not only the thing perhaps that we're blinded to, but then also maybe the thing that doesn't exist yet for us in this plane.
Yeah.
So I mean, the answer that I try to work out in the writing, and I'm still working with, brings, and actually this is another tie between the two creative works that came out of the collaboration. It comes back to the body, because I think often, and my work in movement and my training in anatomy has informed, it's impossible to extract it from my writing and just from my being. We are a very head-centric, word-centric culture, but we are animal beings in bodies. As my mom once reminded me, you can't have a head without, you know, your brain lives in your body. You don't just get to have a brain. And as anatomy, the science of anatomy is starting, people kind of on the front lines or the edges of the research right now are starting to show that our models are a little bit backward, and really neurologically, our heart informs our head. So it's particularly the amygdala, it's taking the heart rate variability, but it starts with the heart. It doesn't start with your head. And another brilliant anatomist whose work I follow was recently talking about in a lecture I heard. So I'm sorry I don't have references. Like, this is very much stuff I'm teasing out for myself right now. But he was talking about the heart. And he speaks of the heart, the organ that we would excavate in a dissection, as the heart center. But if you think about it, the circulatory system runs throughout your entire body, and that fluid gets touched by your heart. And it's so much more connected than not. And this, again, you know, our ways of seeing influence every discipline. And when you start to try and look a little more holistically and peel back from this part driven way of seeing the body. The heart is everything. This is your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And, in terms of the heart rate variability, the pulsing, which you want to have more of, is my understanding, for more flexibility. It correlates to kind of more flexibility. As you get older, it decreases. And as you get stiffer, so thinking about rigidity and how we receive each other, you know, what is the balance between structure and fluidity? So many thoughts are coming to me right now, but the one thing I wanted to share with you all on this question is just that that like a electromagnetic field that we are of our hearts can be felt something like 16 feet. So my neighbor in the apartment building right now might be influenced by what my heart is experiencing. And this just changes the way that I think about how we live and how we influence and how we transform. Is it so much that we have to have an idea, or is it that maybe a little bit more bottom up, and we respond, let our bodies and center our hearts in that process, you know, and our emotions and some of these things that are definitely more pushed aside in our culture. So you know, Colleen, around these questions of like, how do we change these structures that seem so rigid and so unchangeable? And this is in that last essay. I just kind of question the rigidity, and I think the more we can soften, and you can feel when your brain and heart are in a fight if you want to. It's not a great feeling. But if you can find the ways to soften, I think we all look for the places we can soften to each other. Where can we flow in compassion? Activists in the work, there's such a narrative of resistance and fight. And I'm wondering what does that do to our bodies? What does that do? What kind of visibility? What is your view when that is your parameter? And this question of what makes the invisible visible, how do we widen our view? And maybe how do we look in different ways? So I don't know that all of this will get, what is that quote about, you can't solve the problem with the thing that created it? And in some ways, I think our very head-centric idea first ways of being have boxed us into these places. And so these are the questions that the writings ask, and that, you know, the bodies, Colleen, your attention to the bodies of these beings, it calls us back to our own bodies.
That's great. That's a lot.
Thank you.
I'll just add that one reason I think that art is so essential right now, and always has been, but is that you do, it's a full experience, you know, and it's often very beautiful. And of course, beauty, you know, is something we will let in. I think of the 3 stories that I wrote, the one that everyone reflects back to me that struck them the most is the middle one, which speaks about someone who saw a hummingbird, you know, like. And so I also think about transformation is kind of what ways do we want to flow, and beauty calls us forward. It calls us together. It calls us out of ourselves. And I think that our culture has restricted the role of art along with many other things. And art has such an important role to play in this transformation that we so need for ourselves and the world.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I'm really struck by the poetics of making this work in your kitchen, like the center of the home where you're nourishing your family. And I'm super curious, like, how it affected the family dynamic. I mean, I know I have a little bit of insider information that it became kind of like the collaborative family project, but I'm super curious, like the conversations that you may have had, like similar or different from family conversations at the dinner table. Do you have anything you want to?
Yeah, I feel like some members of my family, I think, are here, and it's like it was really it's not, you know, as a mom, like my kids are older now, but like there's still the element of benign neglect that really is cool, because presence, your presence, maybe my kids could mute. So
That'd be great.
or not mute, but don't listen, because like that, there was an intention for me to be present while last spring Elsa was, online learning. And Ruth was preparing in the December and January. Part of this project sprung from her energy of creating her applications to art school. She had prompts, she was working, she was down in the basement making these things, and almost like that energy of making was so inspiring to me, to like, I'm gonna make too. I'm gonna stand by her side and make these, try to figure out how to do a silicone mold, because as almost a pillar to support her effort, that because my studio is upstairs and it's way in the front, and if I were editing a video, I wouldn't be present, and And then also my husband and I it was like talk time, like we, right, Mike, are you here? I don't even know, but.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
there
I
you
was
are.
just gonna say it was really nice to have you around in the kitchen doing your work, because so often you'd be up in the studio. And it really seemed like a calming thing for you. No, really,
That's
like
true. I forgot about that.
it was just this, I don't know, thing you would do, and you always seemed peaceful and calm doing it. And then we could just sit there at the kitchen table and talk while you were doing it. And I just think in the last year you doing that, it was nice to have you around when you were working in the kitchen, because so often you're up there, and we got to see our dog more because he always wants to be with you.
Yeah, right.
He's around instead up there with you, and it was just I don't know how to describe it. It was nice to have you doing that always around the kitchen.
I felt like I missed doing it. So I couldn't get the bones to stop breaking. So I gave up at a certain point. I needed just enough for the Edelman show in July. I wanted 10. And so as soon as I got 10, I was gonna stop, because they break every time you open it. And then I missed them. I missed making them. I missed that time. So I resumed making them, because it was such a gift of making. So I think that now I still miss. I'm like, should I keep making for them forever? Like, no, I mean, it's really good I think to have a practice. Like Ame, you're always making, and it's like very, very, very grounding to constantly have something to make, something to do, and that there's always there's also like a super obsessiveness to it that I found that I must have. It's what I'm recording Snow Lily every day, doing projections of the elephants all the time when I can. It's like this repetitiveness of making is, I guess I'm finding, is something that maybe because if you have something to say and if you keep doing it, it's like undeniable. Like I recorded Snow Lily right when Trump was elected, and because he was just disassembling all the environmental protections, and I was like, well, I'm going to keep doing this because this is undeniable that this is not good. We have to save the planet. And if you have enough evidence, you don't have to say much. You can just show that. So I guess it's this evidence is, I really like the power of that.
something that really motivates my own art making, which is this sense of the sort of spiritual energy in the making of the, you know, that it, what you described as this kind of honoring each life. And so it's really interesting to think about that in terms of this documentary specificity. You know, there's this balance that's really interesting in your work that I find really inspiring.
Do you think that I mean, I feel like as artists, you know, Kate, you're a writer, and Liz, you're making, and I mean, just this act, and I see Paul is on here, Paul D'Amato, and like this going out and making, and this call to solve something, to make something. Like, I guess that's what we're all doing, right? I mean, Terry, I see Terry is on here too, like this pull to go back to the tree. And Terry, I know, has been photographing this tree, and like this pull that we want to go back. And there's just something so, what a gift to have that pull, you know, that is a gift. Like, so the process of writing, of making, of questioning, and then we get to share it. I mean, I also think, like, what a time to be showing work, and we're in such a time right now. It just feels like, should we be even talking about that? You know, it's like there's more important, there's a crisis. And then I think what you said, Liz, recently is like, that is the time. Like, this is the time, like, to keep going. We keep going with our work. We keep going with trying, you know, trying and persisting and deepening, even in spite of whatever is going on, you know. So I really appreciated you saying that, because I was like, this is not the right time to, you know, do anything.
Well, I was just thinking about this idea of making, and it reminded me of my grandmother, who was always making, and it always was around the kitchen. She had the place she sewed was just right off of the kitchen. She made quilts, she hooked rugs, she embroidered things, she made dolls, she made teddy bears. When she wasn't cooking or taking care of the house, she was making something. And so I'm just wondering, do you think that, and I was thinking about what Mike said, which was very powerful, and about my own history and how the making mostly wasn't right in the heart of the family. But I'm just wondering if that making actually comes from a traditional way of being, a traditional way of all making was part of at the heart of the household, like it was for my grandmother. And so it has a kind of rightness about it because it belongs to our process somehow, you know. And that's why it matters. Anyway, this isn't formed, but I'm just inspired by what you're saying.
That's a great, I mean, just thinking about our traditions as human beings, right? Our like community building, family connectivity is about preparation or surviving, making a basket, weaving, survive, you know, whatever around a fire. Isn't that how we're wired, you know? So maybe that is what's in play here.
I'll join the conversation since you mentioned me, Colleen. And I think you all should appreciate that great Terry Evans piece that's right behind me. See, Terry? Yeah, I mean, that process of being able to focus on energy on something, to have a kind of process, whether you're making those sculptures in your kitchen or whether we're constantly going out, that's a gift, because we need to do something in the same sense that the elephant in a way paces back and forth. On some level, it's a kind of pacing in the world. But the real gift, I think, is it allows us to take those tools and focus a set of concerns that we have about the world, within ourselves, whatever. And I would just say this about you, Colleen, because I've been thinking this for a while. Through whatever you've done, whether it's making photographs of poor animals in zoos, or try and raise awareness of this by making big video projections of them, and various books, it always, behind everything you do, it seems to me, is empathy. You know, and I, as a tool for making us aware of something, you know, and raising consciousness. So could you talk to me about where that comes from for you? Are you inspired by other people who have made you appreciate that as a kind of tool, weapon even? Is it just in you? Can you just talk about the role of empathy?
Thanks, Paul. That's good. Means a lot, actually, the question. I think that, I don't know, I wonder if underneath it is just a frustration of powerlessness, perhaps, you know, that things what can we do? I don't know. I mean, I guess I think that maybe I'm just wired. Like, actually, the other night I was sitting right out here, I was leaving, and I heard that there were 6 rangers killed in Africa, that they protect the animals in this park. Those park rangers, and 6 of them were slaughtered, killed. These guys, these heroes of protecting gorillas. And I think that I don't think it's like have so much empathy. I think I actually have so much rage, maybe. You know, rage that things are fucked up. And I also don't mean to make work. I feel like sometimes I make work that's hard to, you know, it's like, I want to make work that's about solution, but that's why, Kate, I really like what you said about envisioning. If we can't picture the solution, it won't happen. We have to picture it, right? So I don't know, maybe, I guess the way I grew up, or, you know, you can analyze it, but I don't know, without getting like too, I don't know, growing up as a girl and you don't really, maybe I identify, I guess, with this stuff. Like, maybe that it's like, you don't have as much of a voice as you want if you grow up in a kind of a sexist household. And, so there's rage about that, and then there comes the empathy, because I relate, I guess. I mean, don't we all relate to feeling powerless or trapped, or voiceless, or if there's injustice? You know, this stuff will drive you nuts, but you could ignore it too. I mean, you don't ignore it. Like, people, I think that as artists, I just think that it's maybe a wiring. If you're not ignoring things that are unjust, you're awake, right? You're alive. You want to do something. And then I also get depressed, you know, and then I also have to come out, like, work hard to climb out of that, so that there's a point, there's a purpose, like, to try to do something different. So I kind of went all over the place, but I do think that I am wired as a person who, I mean, I don't know how many people sit in their car are crying about these rangers. I was so upset. I'm like, how is it that they got killed? You know, these men who are giving their life to protecting you know, the few gorillas left. How is that allowed? How are we allowing that? How are we allowing that, right? In society, how are we allowing people to work in these factories? And so, you know what, it's like to never lose hope. Every little bit makes a difference. Everything we do makes a difference. Ask my kids' teacher not to take them to the zoo, to try to just change just tiny little changes. And I don't think I think now I know I don't mean to be so, okay, whatever. I just feel like that's the work I want to do for the rest of my life, is to try to, maybe I could move even more into solution. Like, what could I do next that is like solution, like envisioning a solution instead of only focusing on the problem. I feel like if I were to, that would be cool to do that, to really start moving into doing that.
It's interesting. I just would say I appreciate that about your work, because I don't think we're all trained to be empathetic. I would actually, as you were talking, it occurs to me that maybe men aren't in our culture trained to be as empathetic maybe as women. I don't know, but I can say when we sense it in a work of art, it's infectious, right? You make us care, right? And that's a tool, that's a weapon. I don't think I'm not sure it's our job as artists to come up with the solutions, but it's our job to certainly make certain issues feel like they are essential things to care about, you know? And so that's important. I just want to say that. And we do it with words, Katherine, we do it with pictures, we do it with all kinds of things, but these are complicated problems. It would be hard for us to solve them at the same time. You know,
right.
that's asking a lot.
We'll chisel away. We'll just keep chiseling away, right?
I will say thank you so much to both of you. This has been a wonderful, wonderful way to spend a little time on a Saturday afternoon.
And it's an honor to have the show here. You know, it's such a gem of a place, and to have an opportunity to like work in a space and try and figure out how to do this is really a gift. So thanks. Thank you, everybody. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.